Well, this morning, we're talking about confession this morning, confessing our sin. So it's going to be a super happy sermon, obviously. But I hope this morning, I've titled this sermon in your bulletin, Let's Be Honest. And I hope this morning that we can just be honest about some of the ugly places in our soul. I know we don't go there very often. We don't like to talk about it. We like to hide it. But I hope that we can look at some of those this morning. So let's get into this. In 2011, you guys may be aware of this, that the city of Flint, Michigan declared bankruptcy. They couldn't pay their bills, and so over the next few years, the city officials tried to come up with ways to save money. And one of those money-saving efforts has received a lot of media attention lately. You guys all know about the water in Flint, Michigan. For years, Flint pumped its water 65 miles from Detroit, and so they had clear, good water pumping from Detroit. But as they looked, they thought, we can save $1 million a year by pumping water out of our own river, Flint River, that runs right through Flint, Michigan. So let's save some money. I mean, I'd love to save $1 million a year. So they did that, and the only problem is, though, that the Flint River is about as delicious as it sounds. The water's pretty gross. You can see a picture of Flint water up on the screen. It's pretty gross stuff. It's got some agriculture runoff, some industrial waste and sewage in it, and due to the unique presence of some of the chemicals, hold on, sorry about this, I'm having some problems. Certain chemicals there, basically they couldn't treat the water at all. I'm just going to do this. They couldn't treat the water. Nothing they could do really worked. And so, let me see where I'm at here, sorry. Okay, so we've got lead in the water, as you guys have found. This is all over the news. There's lead in the water. The EPA puts a limit that it's safe for humans to drink if there's 15 parts lead per billion parts water. Hazardous waste is defined as 5,000 parts per billion, and Virginia Tech tested water in Flint. Some of it had 13,000 parts lead per billion. So it's over double the standard of toxic waste, hazardous waste. So it's pretty gross there. It's hard to gauge the toxic effects that the water's had on the people. We know that lead poisoning, its effects aren't immediately evident. They may take a lot of years before they become evident. Lead poisoning, we know, can lead to attention deficit disorders, anemia, hypertension, renal impairment, immunotoxicity, brain damage. It can also leave you infertile if you have very high levels. Flint, Michigan right now is currently under a state of emergency. This morning, I don't want to talk about Flint water necessarily. I don't want to talk about clean water or dirty water. What I intend to say this morning is more about our souls. Flint, Michigan has a water crisis right now. But I believe in our souls, we're under a state of emergency as well. But it's not necessarily about our water, there's sin. And though the effects of lead poisoning, we know there's been some cover-up in Flint. They've tried to push it under the surface. You can try and do that with sin. You can try and hide it and push it under the surface, but its effects are long-lasting, and they happen down the road. And just like what's happening in Flint, it affects our children. So this morning, I want to talk about our souls. I don't want to talk, this isn't necessarily about salvation. If you have confessed your sin to God, if you've given your life to Jesus, if you've been baptized with Him in His death, burial, and resurrection, all your sins are gone. When God looks at you, He only sees the righteousness of Christ. So it's only, if you're saved, don't worry about getting into heaven. It's kind of like if you guys own a house. I have a mortgage, so the bank owns my house, and they kind of let me live there. I'm going to put this down. Does this sound weird to you guys? Mm-hmm. Sorry about this, guys. Thing doesn't fit my face or something. Got a weird shaped face. Okay, that'll be better. Some of you you guys own a house, but sometimes some of the rooms in your house are a little bit dirty. When you have people over, maybe there's that one like kid's bedroom or that bathroom upstairs that you kind of just shut the door and like, oh yeah, this is a kid's room, let's keep moving. That's what I'm talking about with confession this morning with our souls. Yes, we're saved, we're in heaven, but there's still some ugliness in there. There's still some dirty rooms in our heart that we need to let God get into to clean out. So that's what we're talking about this morning. If you have your Bibles, please turn to Psalm 51. This is a psalm that David wrote after he was convicted of his most atrocious sin. You guys may know this story about David, that he saw this beautiful woman bathing, and he said, I want that woman. So he took her, he lay with her, she conceived. He had this conspiracy of lies and deceit. He had the woman's husband murdered, and then he gets convicted of this. He's like, man, I'm an adulterer, I'm a liar, I'm a backstabber, I'm a murderer. And so this is what David writes as a confession for this horrible sin. Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. So that you are proved right when you speak, and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Surely you desire truth in the innermost parts. You teach me wisdom in the inmost place. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Blot out my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will turn back to you. Save me from blood guilt, O God, the God who saves me, and my tongue will sing your righteousness. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare. So I've been looking at this psalm. I really see there's three parts to confession. There's kind of three stages, if you will, and they're in your bulletin outline. The first stage you see is facing the ugliness, or maybe groveling even. You just have you ever had that weight of your own sin and something you've done or a habit that you have, and it just kind of sits on you? We see this in this all over this psalm. Verse 1, he's crying out for mercy. In verses 1 through 6, he says a word like sin or iniquity or evil or transgression 9 times in 6 verses. So it's just on his mind. He's saying it a lot. Verse 5, there's no excuse, right? He says, I was sinful even from birth. He said, even farther than that, even when I was conceived, like when I was a baby in the womb, he's like, pure evil. Have you ever felt like that? Verse 8, crushed bones. Verse 9 says, hide your face from my sin. In verse 7, he talks about a broken spirit and a broken heart. He's groveling in this sin. He knows the ugliness of what he's done. And I think sometimes we feel like hiding our sin might be the same as not having sin in our life. You know, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if no one hears it? You know, if no one's around, a tree falls, does it make a sound? Well, yes, it does. If I sin, if I have evil in my heart, but I hide it pretty good, does it really matter? Well, I don't know. Does it? Yes, it does. If I hate, now I'm judgmental and I see someone and I just have these feelings in my heart towards that person that's judgmental and hateful, but I keep it to myself, does that matter? Or if I cheat on my taxes, one of the easiest things to hide, does that really matter? I mean, the government's got so much money and they're not doing a good job with it anyway, so does that matter? Does that quick, lustful glance that nobody notices, does that matter? If I gossip or if I say things passive-aggressively, you know, I've got these feelings and I need to get them out, but I'm just passive-aggressive about it, you know, is that a mean thing? These ugly places in our soul, these feelings that we have that we don't speak out, but are very, very real, do those matter? Do those matter to God? I want to say that yes, they do. They're like that lead poisoning, that the effects are under the surface. They might take years down the road where you think, well, okay, yeah, we've got high levels of lead in the blood, but you don't see it for 10 years. That's such an illustration for sin. Oh, this isn't a big deal in my life. 10 years down the road, you're looking at like, my life is a train wreck because of this thing that started so small. The second thing we see in this psalm is being honest with God. There's just this honesty that comes out. And we see that in verse 4. This is the second stage of confession. Verse 4 says, "Against you, you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight, so that you're proved right when you judge, when you speak, and justified when you judge." I think that there is a lot of pain that we feel when we say the word evil about ourselves. When we say, that thing was evil. Or something we never said in Illinois that I really like that we say in Kentucky is when someone does something mean and we say, oh, that was ugly. Don't do ugly stuff. I like that we describe it as ugly. And I think that's a perfect description for these places in our soul, those ugly spots, those ugly feelings and thoughts that we have. Our gossip, lust, our anger. This is one that hits home to me real big. Gluttony. The Bible says that's a sin. And we don't like to confess that as evil. We don't like to go there. We're like, well, I overeat. And, since I've been married, you guys know I used to be skinny and now I'm like puffing up. My clothes don't fit anymore. And I make jokes about that, but I shouldn't. It's hard for us to say the word evil with a lot of these sins. Like, well, that's not it was a white lie, but it was just to save their feelings. Something like that. But part of this is being honest with God. R pointed out to me this week that when we confess, we're agreeing with God. Basically, God knows it's evil, and we say, God, you're right. This is evil. And we agree with him about that. Another thing, this hits so home to me, is James 4:17 says, if anyone knows the good he ought to do, but does not do it, he sins. These are sins of omission. We know about those. How many times do I see the person walking on the side of the road, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to stop and give them a ride and there's all these reasons. If you know the good you ought to do, but don't do them, you sin. I got this Charlie Brown. I feel this is how I deal with sin a lot. I've got this Charlie Brown comic up here. It says, can we get that? Let's get these things. Line that says, I don't like to face problems head on. I think the best way to solve problems is avoid them. This is a distinct philosophy of mine. No problem is so big or complicated that it can't be run away from. And I feel like sometimes that's what we do with our sin. We're just like, it's not there, let's just hide it, sweep it under the rug, and it won't be there. But confession is that time when we say, God, I've got an ugly place in my soul. That upstairs closet that I've just shoved all the towels into and shut the door, it's ugly, and I need you to come in and clean it out. That bitterness that I have towards that person that I haven't forgiven, I need you to get in there and clean that out. This group of people that I'm so judgmental towards, just when I see this kind of person, I just don't like them. I need you to clean that ugliness out of my soul. The fact that I don't want to help all these people in other countries, I need you to clean that out. And again, I do want to stop and say that I don't want to give you guys a list of, don't be judgmental, start forgiving. It's not a list of do's and don'ts, but I'm saying these emotions that we have, that all we need to do is allow God into these places. Open our hearts so that he can shine his light in. And that's about the third stage, is cleansing. This is the best part. This is where it starts to pick up a little bit. All right, verse 7 says, cleanse me with hyssop and I will be clean. Wash me and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you've crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Again, oftentimes we don't, in the church world, we don't address the root issue, which is our souls, which is the ugliness in that place. But we are good at facing the symptoms. So I looked up a bacterial infection. This is WebMD. That's how we all become doctors. Just get on WebMD. So these are the symptoms. If you have a bacterial infection, you might get a headache, or you might have a fever, you might get nauseous, be sleepy, sensitive to light, you might have a skin rash. So what if we had a bacterial infection and we said, all right, this is how you heal one of those. Got a fever? Take some Tylenol. Got a headache? Take another Tylenol for the pain. Nauseous? Here's some Pepto-Bismol. Sleepiness? Here's some coffee. Sensitivity to light? Sunglasses and skin rash lotion. If we did that, would we heal the bacterial infection? No. We've only addressed the symptoms of the thing. We haven't really gotten to the root issue, which need antibiotics to heal that thing. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like in the church world, sometimes we're guilty of the same thing. In church, we might see someone, we might be feeling materialistic or greedy. Solution to that? You just need to tithe to the church. Anger. You might be struggling, like you're always angry and frustrated with people. Just read this book on anger management techniques. Just count to 10 when you're angry. Or lust. Try really hard not to look. That's our solution to that problem. Laziness, get a job. Judgmentalism, just don't talk about it publicly. Just keep that. These are our solutions to the symptoms of our souls, rather than, if we were to confess, bringing these things before God, laying them out, and letting His light do the work. It would be insane if we would try to deal with a bacterial infection with Pepto-Bismol and sunglasses. Just like it's insane for us to deal with our sinfulness by do this, do this, do this, a list of do's and don'ts. Instead, we need to have that willingness to confess and say, man, I'm broken in this area. Man, I need God to heal this part of my soul. So, in conclusion, I actually wanted to leave you guys with just some tips, like some very practical ways that we can allow God to come into these places in our souls and just lay them bare so that He can shine His light on them. Just really practical that you can do every week. You can pray the words of Psalm 51. That's the first thing. If you're ever, like he says in this, if you feel you have crushed bones, if you're saying to God, like, I need a new heart, you can just go to Psalm 51 and pray the words of this passage. Secondly, I think we at Mortons Gap Christian Church need to accept or be more open to a culture of brokenness. And this is weird to talk about. I was so aware of this morning. When people come in, hi, how are you? Good. Good. How are you? Good. How's your week? Great. Great. Good to see you. And I did that like 20 times this morning. And I do want to have like more than surface level relationships, but then there's like 50 people and we're all like kind of passing. So I know there's like a social awkwardness to that too. But I'm saying, like, is it okay for someone to just come in here and say, hey, how are you? Awful. I'm so angry right now. Or I'm so depressed. I'm so scared. Would we be okay with that? Or would it be like, okay, well, see ya, good luck with that. One time, I was in Knoxville going to, on one Sunday, I forget why I was depressed. I was trying to think of this week. It was probably because Courtney and I were on the fritz at one point, but I was really down one Sunday morning. So I just went driving, and I was just looking for a church service. I was like at a weird time. So found this small Methodist church and went in. It was this beautiful sanctuary with like stone everywhere and these huge like wooden beams going in. So it was like awesome. And I was like, this is just what I need. So I went and I sat and I just started praying. But then all these people started coming up to me and interrupting my praying. And they were like, hey, how you doing? And they told me like all the 15 ministries they have for me. And I was like, I just want to sit here and pray. Like, I'm just in a bad place and I just want to pray. Are we open for people who are broken to come in here and have God's light shine on their brokenness? Third thing is we're about to sing a song. And I've asked Stephen to come up during this song. And if you actually want to confess sin, If you want to say, I need prayer, this is something I've been going through, and I need God's light to shine on this broken spot in my heart. Art and Steve will be available during this song for you to do that. And I know we like don't really ever do that at this church. Like, we don't come up for prayer. And I don't know why that is, but if you do need prayer, don't be afraid of that, because we need to just be honest. Like, I'm not okay all the time, and you're not okay all the time. And I get scared sometimes, and so do you. And I struggle with sin, and so do you. And let's be honest about that. So if you do need prayer today, Art and Steve have said they will be available during this next song to come up. So will you please worship with us for this last song?